Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Doctors of Running podcast, where we, a group of doctors of physical therapy, discuss the art and science of running and the stuff that we put on our feet. Today at the round table, we have the founder of Doctors of Running, Dr. Matthew Klein, as well as Dr. David Salas, and I am here as well. I'm Nathan Brown, and we are excited to kick off our first recording of 2025 with one of our favorite formats, a this or that episode. So we're going to talk about a lot of the different shoes that we've been testing recently at Doctors of Running, and also some other running related topics where we're going to pose one idea or one shoe against another idea or another shoe, and we're forced to pick one, which is fun for us because if you've listened to us for any amount of time, you've probably realized that we are very nuanced in the way that we approach pretty much any question. We don't have definitive, this is the best, that's the best, this is the right answer, that's the right answer. There's a lot of complexity, even in something as silly as running shoes. And so we have a lot of fun doing these episodes because they force us into a comfort zone that is different, or that's to something that's outside of our comfort zone. So we are going to kick it off with a shoe related question. These are shoes that we've been testing recently, and it is this or that, the new Clifton or the new Bondi from Hoka.
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, I guess I can go first. I got them right here next to me. What are you laughing at, Nate? Huh? What's so silly, huh?
Nothing. I gotta say it now. I gotta say it. Everybody, I have a confession to make. We just got done recording the first almost 20 minutes of this podcast when I realized I didn't have my microphone connected. So I have just ruined everybody's evening. Not any of you. Y'all are listening whenever you listen. But these guys and myself, now we're here for another 20 minutes longer because whatever. So when Dave was like, ooh, that's a good one, it cracked me up inside because I'm like, well, we already just talked about this. We just finished talking about this. But let's move forward. David, what do you think?
Yes. I had a very, very lengthy talk about the heel construction of the Bondi, which may or may not be as lengthy as the second time around. But yes, we have the Hoka Bondi 9 and the Hoka Clifton 10. So newest versions of both shoes, both neutral category. The flagship trainer has always been kind of the Clifton, with the quote unquote premium version of the shoes being the Bondi. And I think with the newest version, Hoka has done a good job of really differentiating the shoes. They've always kind of been a little bit similar, but they really kind of made an effort to make the Bondi genuinely more plush than the Clifton and make it a quote unquote premium shoe. And we'll start off with the Bondi there. I don't have the specific specifications that I could find from Stack Height. Supposedly they added more Stack Height to the Bondi. Saw somewhere 43, but on their website I can't find it. So we'll just ditch that. But they put a supercritical EVA midsole in the shoe, still 5mm drop. And then they kind of reconstructed the heel to be really structured. So they really wanted to have a stable heel in rear foot. And then the rest of it is all pretty similar. Bondi experience, a lot of sole flaring, rocker experience, relatively stiff, but they have some flex grooves. The upper, they did update to make it more soft and plush as well, which I do think is noticeable from previous versions. So everything about it, they kind of tried to make a little bit more of a more plush experience. Now, with that said, that supercritical EVA, yes, it is a little bit lighter and a little softer than the previous Bondis, but those foams were already a little on the firm side to begin with. And I will say the supercritical EVA, it's softer, but it's not, I still wouldn't go as far to say it's soft. It still feels kind of like a structured cushioning there. It's a lot of foam and it's very protective, but it's not as soft as those Piba foams out there. So if you kind of want it to be a little bit softer, a little bit lighter, it's got that. So Hoka Clifton 10, again, it's brand new, fresh off the press. We don't have all of the specifications for this shoe either. I heard somewhere that they added a little bit of stack there as well. I don't have full confirmation on that, and I don't have specifications. I can assume it's probably a similar platform for the most part. I don't believe it has the supercritical EVA midsole. They do feel different between the shoes, even just kind of pressing it generally. Heel isn't quite as built up, but there is still some sole flaring. It's still a neutral platform. I'd say it's still a little bit wider than more traditional neutral shoes are as far as the cross-sectional area underfoot. But again, it's not as much as the Bondi. So this one still feels a little bit more like a true neutral shoe. And then just out of weight, because I don't have official specifications. Well, the official listing is 10.5 for the Bondi 9. I just don't have the official for the Clifton, but my men's 9.5 weight, 10.6 ounces in the Bondi 9 and 9.9 ounces in the Clifton 10. So the Clifton does come in a little bit lighter as well. So, whew.
All
that's my condensed version.
What do you like better?
You didn't even pick one.
Better? You got to pick one.
Yeah. What am I going to pick? I'm going to pick the Clifton. So Clifton. And after all of that, I'm going to say the Clifton. For me, it's mainly because of the heel, and the heel isn't bad on the Bondi. I just want to say that up front. It's just a lot. It's very structured. Those who like a lot of rear foot stability and like having that width, it's there. And I think it is constructed pretty well. I just think it's a little much for me personally with my mechanics. I like that the Clifton's a little bit lighter in weight. The foam does feel a little bit firmer, but there's a lot of it. So it's still, again, it's very protective, kind of a structured cushioning feel. The rocker is familiar with previous Cliftons. The upper is a little bit more snug, I think, than other Cliftons, but it has broken in pretty quickly. It's a Clifton. It carries a lot of the Clifton DNA. I like it, especially at the price point. I think it just fits my mechanics a little bit more, and it's kind of a nice neutral trainer.
Nice. Matt, what do you pick?
I'm going to pick Clifton. I can appreciate both shoes. I can appreciate the Bondi moving into being more of a Bondi. 100% agree with David, and I'm glad somebody else said that, where it still doesn't feel that soft, especially initially. It has broken in, but it just doesn't. It's very balanced cushioning, and it's really structured. And I'm going to screw this name up again, and we talked about this in the previous attempt at this episode. I'm probably still going to get this wrong. The sidewalls are so intense and there's so much structure that the Gaviota.
Yes, Gaviota. Wow. Let's take a moment.
This deserves a moment. This does. Good job, Matt.
Thanks a lot. I think there's a lot of overlap with the Gaviota, so I'm hoping the Gaviota 6 has some differentiation, or I don't even know if they're going to have one, so we'll have to ask about that. But it is very structured, which walking when I first put it on, I was like, whoa. On the run didn't feel bad, but that's because I need a little bit of guidance. So I think that's great, but it's kind of not my shoe. It's heavy. It doesn't work well if you try to pick up the pace at all, whereas the Clifton 10 is that shoe, even though I think it gained quite a bit of weight compared to my last one. It has definitely become more of that kind of classic daily trainer for Hoka rather than what its the early renditions are, because Hoka has plenty of lightweight trainers now. So I'm glad they're differentiating that. But it's slightly firmer. It's a teeny bit more snug without being too narrow. And it's just got that little bit of everything where I can still pick up the pace a little bit, feels comfortable. Heel is way more stable than the last version, which is why I could not handle the 9. It was just too soft and unstable in the rear foot, and it really bugged me. This one, if you like a little bit more structure in the heel, great, but Clifton 10 is going to be the clear winner for me.
Nice. Well, I haven't gotten the Bondi yet, but I really loved the Clifton 9. It was one of my trainers of the year nominations for myself, and I really liked that from 8 to 9, the foam went from kind of just a very flat foam to having some pop in it. How would y'all say the difference is between the 9 of the Clifton to the 10? Does it still have a little bit of that pop to it, or how has that been modified, if at all?
And I don't know if it's a recency thing and the foam needs to break in a little bit more, but I'd say the Clifton 10 actually feels a little bit firmer than I remember the Clifton 9 being. And it's been a while since I had the Clifton 9 on my foot, so take what I'm saying with some grace here. But it feels a little bit firmer to me, but I actually kind of liked it. I tend to like kind of those firmer cushioned shoes. It just works well for my mechanics. It's kind of like a firmer rocker, but not super dramatic either.
I would say that little, Nathan, what was the word you used? What were you? Yeah, I would say it doesn't feel.
I don't know.
It's okay. No, it didn't feel like a resilience kind of thing, like the foam's compressing and kind of popping back. It just, to me, the platform, it feels a little bit firmer, but it feels a little bit more snappy, like a little bit stiffer. Okay. So when you kind of roll through, it's like, all right, it's a different kind. So not as much from the midsole itself, but more from the stiffness of the platform.
Cool. That's great. And now that it's important, I think, that they're differentiating those two models, because I think that in the past they've seemed very similar in a lot of ways. how would you, or Matt, what do you got before I ask my question?
I would say there's a couple companies that have gone through this, and so it's really differentiating these models is key and not having too overlap. Like Saucony just went through this with previous versions of the Ride and the Triumph, and it was like almost the same weight, almost like very similar function, the Power M Plus.
Cumulus and Nimbus was that too.
Yes, for sure.
Before the Nimbus 25, it was like these are both very similar.
So it's not just Hoka. I think there's been some of this in recent years. So yes, I think it's great that they really have differentiated. But
cool. So my question was going to be then, what for those who are used to an older Bondi experience, what is the newest Bondi most like comparatively?
It's a tricky one to answer because they structured that heel so much that this shoe is like almost certainly like it's a stable neutral shoe. Like there's a lot of sole flaring, it's very wide. Heel is, like I said, it's really structured with the sidewalls and everything too. I almost would lean towards like the Asics Kayano series of the recent ones. A good amount of sole flare. Like there's a lot of resemblance there. Kayano is obviously geared to be, max stability. But I don't think I'd put the Bondi quite that far on the spectrum. It is meant to be a neutral shoe, but because of that rear foot experience, that's kind of where I'm leaning shoes along that area.
I 100% agree with that. That like we were talking about this earlier about like, would it be Nimbus, which is a very different shoe than the softer the Nimbus 27 is very different than Nimbus 26 and 25, and it's not soft anymore. Whereas the Kayano is still soft. I will say the Bondi has a little bit better heel bevel, which is kind of classic, and I think hopefully Asics will clean that up. But I would say the Kayano is the current version is less stable than prior versions, and actually the Bondi and that one is a really good comparison just because so much is coming from sidewalls and geometry that I think that's actually a similar comparison, which is also why you see a ton of people out, like hospitals or just in general, wearing Bondi, Kayano. Yeah. I've seen a ton of people wearing glycerins more frequently.
I'd say Brooks has been.
Brooks has been picking it up. So, yeah,
also,
I think it's a good comparison.
Is it Kayano or Kayano?
Are you asking or are you telling me?
I just want to make you.
I don't know.
All right, let's move on to our next this or that. So our next this or that is not specific shoes, but it's talking about shoe construction. This or that, a shoe built with a wide toe box or a shoe built with a high volume toe box. Matt, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm going to say a wider toe box just because my foot isn't the highest volume. So width is really important, especially in that toe box, and not like I don't always need to have an ultra or topo style width. It just needs to be wider and a little bit less tapered because that tapering just can give me some blisters, and I've just been sensitive to that. So width to me is more important personally than volume, because I feel like you can have a lot of volume, which then, in my opinion, because my feet aren't that high volume, really gives me some trouble with locking down the upper. Whereas if it's wide but low volume, it's a lot more secure, and I can deal with some of the abrasions I get initially, but then I'm fine.
What do you think, David?
Yeah, so I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I feel like when I look at issues that I have with shoes, when I do have issues, it's usually not forefoot
shoes.
Oh no.
Dude, that should be a podcast.
You know what's funny is this is the first time he did that this episode. Last episode he was doing this the entire episode. Last episode. Yeah, last time we recorded the same episode. Yeah. That was yeah, the last episode. Okay. But I usually don't have problems with forefoot width. Like I don't mind it. I do like it, but usually like if it runs a little narrow, like I'm still okay. But I have noticed in recent history, I have had a couple shoes where I'm like, dang, I just wish there was a little bit more space under there where that volume is just really snug. And it usually breaks in, but sometimes I think having a little bit more forefoot volume, I've been a little bit more appreciative of lately.
Cool. I think I fall on the side with Matt here, where if I had to pick, I would say width. I feel like every time we talk about this, I always say how volume is important. But when I do talk about that, I assume that width is part of that equation. Because for me, if a shoe is lower height, but it has enough width, I can run in it. But if it's too narrow, I just can't run in it. It doesn't have a pleasant experience. My feet get irritated, especially with the foot stuff that I've had going on. And so for me, width is number one. And then it does need enough height to get rid of some of the irritation on the top of the foot. And like you said, Matt, I think shoes can get sloppy. I think one of my favorite companies in terms of how they handle their quote wide version is Karhu, because they do high volume is what they call it. And I think that approach is very valuable and is where I would actually fall, because it assumes both width and height. But with the volume, and that's what volume is, because it's all dimensions played into one. But if we're kind of differentiating those two between like how high and how wide, I would go wide first and then height second. But let's move on to our next category, and it is a shoe category again. And these are two more trainers that we've tested. One of them last summer, although I just got my pair a couple weeks ago, so I just started running in it. And then one that's just coming out this year from Mizuno, and it's the Mizuno Neo Zen or the Mizuno Neo Vista. David, what you got?
Yeah, so comparing these two shoes, I'm Neo Zen for a few reasons. And so when I look at the Mizuno Neo Zen, geometry isn't too crazy. It's rounded, but it's not like a crazy, rocker experience. There's a little bit more flexibility because there is no plate. It's like if you go to bend it, there's a decent amount of little stiffness there, and you do get that bounce and pop when you're running in it. But if I really bend it, bend. But yeah, but that's what I was going to say. Under load, you feel it bend a little bit more, and so it has a little bit more of a natural feeling toe off. I think the plate and the geometry of the Neo Zen and how soft it is, like it just doesn't quite work with me as well.
The Vista,
or not the Zen. Sorry, the Vista.
Yeah.
Which is like some of the issues I had with some previous shoes that were plated soft and really rockered. Like I think of the early SC trainer, and a lot of people love that shoe, right? But it just wasn't the shoe for me.
Yeah.
I think of shoes kind of like in that general category. Whereas the
Skyward
Neo
X,
Zen,
maybe?
well, the Skyward X was odd because it was still really stiff and that structure held up. So it wasn't too bad. I actually did okay with the Skyward X.
Cool.
But yeah, anyways, a little bit more natural mechanics. I will say the upper, though, it just moves around a little more than I probably would like. I wish that had a little bit more structure to it. But general experience wise, I'm going to go Neo Zen. I think the ride is really fun and it's a little bit more natural for me. I also want to say you were on the money when you said 20 minutes, because we are coming up on 18 here and you two still got a spree.
Here we go. I'll go next. On this one. So I just got my first pair of Neo Vistas a couple weeks ago. And so I'm very fresh in both, which I think is fun for answering this question because I don't really have a recency bias. In fact, like this morning, I did half my run in the Vista, half my run in the Zen. And I think if I had to choose today, based off of what I prefer today, I would pick the Vista. I think that it's got that rocker platform is much more prominent, and you run through that platform. And I just feel like for the types of easy running that I'm doing right now, it just was so smooth from heel to forefoot. The Zen was also great. Like I honestly really enjoy both of them. Had a great run and have had great runs in both of them since I've gotten them. Hello, a whole new world of Mizuno over this last year, right? But I think the heel construction of the Vista works better for me. It's a little bit more beveled, and that just worked really well with my mechanics. I think that the softness is interesting because when you are stepping, this is my perspective on it, when you're stepping into the Zen, it feels softer. Like it just feels mushy soft, and it runs really cushioned and soft, and it's nice, but not like unstable. When you step into the Vista, it doesn't feel as mushy soft, but then when you run, it compresses a lot more. And so they're just so different, which is also cool. So I think that if I were going to pick a shoe for daily training, for high volume daily training, I'd actually go with the Zen. But for like running experience purely for myself right now, that's where the Vista kind of won out. I agree with you, David. I think the Neo Zen, the upper is a little bit, because they're both a booty construction upper, knit kind of booty. And The Zen is a little bit sloppy and it had a couple wrinkles and stuff, but it wasn't irritable. I could feel myself moving a little. The Neo Vista's upper was much more dialed in, but still had enough room. So yeah, Matt, what do you think?
Also, did you just pick both on this or that?
I know.
No, he picked Vista. He picked Vista.
Did you just swim your way out of that?
He
Like,
picked Vista.
Yeah. Oh no, I caught you.
All right, fine. I'm going to be the one that hard noses toward Vista. So I can appreciate where the Zen is coming from, but I think I have to appreciate that from somebody else's perspective, because the Vista works a lot better for me. I found the Zen to actually be unstable, where that softness pervaded. It wasn't like terrible, but it was enough that like my like deep hip rotators like really got worked with the Zen. They do with the Vista, but not to the same degree. I think because of the resiliency of the foam, like I get a lot more bounce. And Nathan, that was a perfect way to describe it, where when you step under the Zen, it just feels soft. When you step into the Vista, it doesn't necessarily feel soft. When you run it, you get this really big bounce and you're like, whoa. So because of that and the better heel construction and a little better lockdown of the Vista, I still like the Vista better. It's also a shoe that I really like something that can handle a lot of different things. I had a little trouble, I think, because of the softness, getting the Zen to really want to go fast. It can, but it's not what it's really meant for. The Vista can, if you want it to, can move. I've got a 458 stroller mile in the Vista. So didn't intend for that to happen, but it did. So
it's funny, David, what's your perspective on which one feels more stable? Because my perspective. Oh no, you go first. What's your perspective on which one's more stable?
I just want to say Klein's the only person on the planet I know that'll be like, I don't know if I could break 5 in the mile. Hey guys, I just ran a 458 stroller mile
in a trainer.
Yeah.
In a trainer. Yeah. Like,
I mean, that shoe's pretty bouncy. I mean, like I did a lot of workouts in it. That's why I really appreciated it so much. And then I was so surprised to be like, this is not a Pima foam. Like, what is going on here? So,
it's been a while since I've run in the Vista. What was the original question there?
Just the stability comparison, in which, because Matt picked the Zen as more unstable.
Yeah.
It probably
for
is.
himself.
It probably is. Yeah, I mean the plate and the width and everything. Like the Vista probably is a little bit more stable.
And neither one are stable
today. But
I think the thing for me though that makes the instability more noticeable in the Zen is, like I said, the upper. I don't think the platform, like if the upper had more of a better construction, I don't know if that answer would be exactly the same because of how much it compresses, and you can't actually feel the ground with how much it compresses.
Right.
And traction isn't too bad. And you get that natural kind of feeling toe off. Like it feels like it shouldn't be that unstable, but I think my foot was just moving around a little bit more in the Zen. Which makes that more unstable inherently.
My issue stability wise, I actually didn't have an issue with either stability wise. But when I compare them, my issue for the Vista is that they have that huge divide between the middle that goes all the way up to the plate. And so anytime I was turning, the compression amount on one versus the other, it kind of like pitched you one way or the other if you were cornering. So I think that combined with, it's kind of a very full length rocker, that front to back stability, I think, is more prevalent. And then that huge divide in the amounts of that kind of one pillar versus the other, I felt like it was less stable because of that. But I don't know. That was just my perspective on running today, where because the Zen is connected all the way through, even though there's no plate, I felt like I wasn't being pitched one way or the other. Whereas if you are someone who maybe lands way on the outside, maybe you'd feel kind of being pitched laterally or medially. But that was my perspective on it. So should we move on to our next one? All right. We are going with another shoe question, and we're going to keep it with Mizuno while we're here. So it's about a racing shoe. Would you pick the Rebellion Pro 2 or the Rebellion Pro 3?
David, go first.
Yeah, I'm going to pick the Rebellion Pro 1.
Fine, go for it. Why?
Between the two of Pro and 3 and 2, I would go 3. Just so that's out there. I feel like it's just a little bit more stable. The 2 was on the unstable end. And although cornering isn't great in the Pro 3, I felt like that upper did hold you onto the platform better. And I felt like I trusted my footing a little bit more in the Pro 3 than I did in the Pro 2. With that said, the Pro 1, the geometry on that heel wasn't quite as dramatic as these other ones. Traction was just as good, very grippy. Rocker profile was solid. Like I felt like it just worked for my mechanics a little bit more. This like hyper geometry just feels a little excessive to me in the heel there. And it almost feels a little bit jarring. Like where when I get tired and I do tend to overstride a little bit as I get tired and I start to kind of kick that leg out a little bit more. And then I start noticing it. You know, for the most part, if I'm controlled, I'm good. I'm running a nice marathon pace. This shoe's really nice and really fluid, but I feel like it starts to fight me a little bit. Whereas the first version didn't fight me as much as the second or the third version. And so for that reason, it's Rebellion Pro 1 for me. But that's not knocking anything about the shoe. I think the materials are good. I think it's responsive. Again, if I'm under control, the shoe is really nice. As long as I don't take any sharp turns or anything like something like that. Oh, I will say too, the second version, I had a really hard time with cambered roads. I remember that very distinctively. And this one, I felt like it was a little bit better. And I think that might just be because it locked down a little more. Because there's like a road I can think of very specifically here that I had an issue with. And I've run that same road in both shoes. And this one definitely, this one being the Pro 3 for the listeners, felt like it held up a little bit more. So if that was like the only deal breaker for you on the Pro 2, I do think the Pro 3 does that a little bit better. So I answered your question there for both of the answers.
That's great. Matt, what's your pick?
I don't know, to be honest. I've little been thinking about this question, so I'll come to an answer. I'm having the same issue that David is. So I'm going to pick the Rebellion Pro 3 with some caveats and go, I can appreciate it. It doesn't, for whatever reason, feel as tall as I was expecting it to. And I think that's because of how much the midsole is compressing. I feel like even though this is listed as a 4mm drop shoe, it feels like a 10 to 12. I've like for the first time, and I don't know why, but it feels like until I'm running and I'm actually compressing the sole, it feels like my heel is really elevated in the shoe. And then as soon as my mechanics break down, I start to get like a little bit of that patellofemoral, like I'm wearing a higher heel drop shoe and I'm just not used to it right now. It's like the exact same sensation. So when I've got this under control, it's great. And for me, it feels better at longer distance efforts. I just struggle once I get past a certain distance to keep that control. However, that's better than what I felt like the Rebellion Pro 2 was, which I other than, I should have asked for a half size up. It was great. It was really bouncy, but I had a different issue when then I started to get fatigue. That shoe felt like a negative drop shoe. Like the foam compressed so much. And when I hit that heel, it wasn't as jarring as this can be, but it just like, I just went into position going like, I don't think I can take this super long. It was definitely like that shorter, which is weird to say, like that shorter distance, faster shoe that I just needed the right size. And version 3 feels like more of the true marathon type shoe if you got good control. So I am very curious to try the Rebellion Pro. Is it low? They're calling it, where they're not having this crazy geometry. Like I hope they send us that because I didn't even know they were doing that. I'm very curious. I don't know if that's coming to the US, but I'm very curious about that. But
was that a TRE thing? Where did you see that?
TRE and a couple places on like Reddit and things like that. Because I'm always
if there's a dark web for like running content, Klein is there. On it.
I will.
He is the dark web. For
these poor guys, like content. The whole team will get this. I'll find some random prototype on an eBay, and I'm like, look what I found. I should buy this. Nathan's like, please don't. Like,
this dude has found like full on catalogs in other languages.
Yeah.
I'm like where? How did you
translated them so that you can read them? All right.
Like, and this is before we even like had as many companies we worked with as we did. It'd be like, oh, hey, did you see this thing from some company you've never heard of? Yeah, here it is.
It's a Rebellion Pro 3.
Great. So before we go to our next this or that, we also just want to thank Scratch for their partnership in powering this podcast. It's been fun working with them, and we're continuing to do so in 2025. as of now, the code that we still have is DOR24. So if you have not used that code yet, you can get 20% off your first order with Scratch. And they've got some good stuff for in-run fuel. All right, we're going to move on to our next one, which is a little bit of a softball, I think, or we'll see. But it's for socks. Would you rather have no-show socks or crew socks for running?
Ooh.
Crew socks.
What kind of shoes?
Easy. I always race in crew socks. You know that.
I'm crew socks too. It's
easy.
It's a no-brainer for me.
It's also because some of these shoes come out with higher ankle things, and I don't really like having rubbing. Like 1000% crew socks. Easy.
Plus
I got a drawer right
style. He's getting his crew out.
Crew socks.
Matt, what's your
crew socks? Crew socks.
Okay, so for many years, I like the no-show. Just it made me feel fast for whatever reason. I don't like a bunch of things touching my ankle. I'm really sensitive. Recent years, it's had to transition to crew because I'm tired of my Achilles getting like ripped up by all these shoes that either have the really tall like heel tab and all this stuff. So recently it's been crew socks out of necessity. Also because I'm now in the Northwest, I'm freezing my rear off up here and I need like skin coverage over every part of my body. Don't make fun of me, Nathan. I know it's not your version of cold, but I'm freezing.
No, here's my thing. I
thought you didn't wear socks.
Also, it's raining.
I thought you were Mr. Sockless.
Yes. I mean, yeah, when I need to, yes, but right now, no. Not this temperature's my peak. I've got some bad chafing. I haven't told you all that I've like doing some of the sockless testing, just got my feet ripped up. Running sockless.
That's not a mandatory part of testing.
We do not have that in our protocol. That is not part of our standard.
You don't have to run.
It is. If you look on our template, it actually I put it there. So
yeah, you self-imposed.
It'll be like if it's like me reviewing it, it's like sockless, not tested.
Oh, it's so good. Great. Well, I'm glad we agree. It's definitely crew. Crew's the answer.
And plus you can have fun designs. You can have like all kinds of fun stuff on crew socks.
Matt, I just need to...
Is this like a big like millennial versus like Gen Z? Is like the whole new trend is like crew socks and like everybody like the previous generations are like no-show? Is that a thing?
I think that there's something there, but I'm not in that category. So okay. I'm not in that debate. I just like.
But then
socks.
If we're all millennials,
we buck the trend. David,
so
are you a millennial?
Are you saying I am? Oh. Would you say the Gen Z would be no show then? Or are you saying millennial Gen Z both
millennials are supposed to be no show, I think.
Yeah. But
that's not what
Gen Z was crew.
I just need to say
it's like business outer fun socks, right? Like I feel like that's usually the thing.
Yeah. I'm going to say one thing about weather and then we're going to move forward. I'm not in camp. Oh, it's only 25 degrees. That's not cold at all. Because if you live in California or Texas or Florida and it gets 25 degrees, you are in no way ready for that temperature. So I just know it's freezing. It's all relative. Like cold is, there's a threshold where like the cold here becomes dangerous cold, like when it's -20. Like that's a different story. But I'm saying from like a going outside and feeling cold. When I lived in Delaware, the coldest it would get would be like 18. And we would be like, this is so cold. Even though that we were Wisconsinites, by that point, when we were there for a couple of years, we got used to it. So no shame for it feeling cold in the mid 30s or 20s or whatever it is. All power to you. Like that makes sense to me.
I'm still going to get shamed in the YouTube comments.
I think when you get that's like that bone chilling kind of feeling. Yeah, that's not fun.
I think that's what's happening.
That's more my defense because that can actually happen here. But
so one of the modules I have to teach is on the modalities for a course that I have in the spring. So I just talked about like therapeutic heat and cold, and it's because of the specific heat of water that leads to increased amounts of like heating or like heat transfer. And so when you have a lot of like water in the air, you have more heat transfer from your body into the air because the specific heat of water is higher. So it makes sense. It's science. Science says so. All right, let's move to our next one. We're going back to a shoe question. The next is 2 different Saucony shoes. You get to pick either the Saucony Endorphin Speed or the Saucony Endorphin Trainer.
Speed.
Trainer.
Matt? Whoa. I actually didn't expect...
My reasoning is not very good.
Go for it.
I don't have the trainer.
Oh, me neither. Why did we put this one on here? That's all right, Matt. That's amazing, Matt. What's your pick? Why is it trainer?
This might change with the Speed 5, but I feel like they are very different shoes. And for me personally, there's a lot of I really liked the Speed 4. I thought it was great. It was a really fun
You gave
shoe.
an award, yeah.
Yeah. It was a fast shoe that I felt like it really is a lightweight shoe that can very easily be a racing shoe for people that don't do well with really stiff carbon plated shoes. It was great, held up really, really well, did a ton of workouts, ton of long runs. The only challenge I had with it is that it is kind of in that super shoe vein where I liked running in it. I didn't like running in it all the time, even though I did that. Whereas the trainer, to me, feels more like that trainer where it can do easy runs well. It took a second for that heel to break in. It does do long runs really well. It is more stable, at least medially, just because of the way the medial midfoot's filled in a little bit more and almost feels like it's slightly wedged where like the medial side, like the sidewalls and whatever just feel like they come up a little higher than the lateral side. So it works really well for me. And the new Accrediron foam is awesome. Like I've done every kind of workout in the shoe. Would it be a shoe I chose to race in? No. But if I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to do an easy run or workout, it is the shoe on my feet. It's been really great. Durability isn't the best. I would say the Speed wins on durability. But it is better now. I have 100 miles on this pair, and this is the left one, and the outsole is still intact. Other than that,
That looks pretty good to me.
That looks really good. Yeah,
this is just not. I mean, if that lateral forefoot's getting chewed through a little bit, but they know me, and so the fact that this is still intact is good.
They probably built that outsole just for you.
Yeah.
So now you gotta tell me because I feel like you really loved the Speed.
Mm-hmm.
I also, as someone who hasn't touched or ran in the shoe, see the Endorphin Trainer as the successor to the Kinvara Pro, which was a miss for a lot of people. I enjoyed running in it, but what are the differences there and how did it vault kind of over the Speed for you? Like how is it different from the Kinvara Pro?
The Kinvara Pro I had a lot of hope for and then just kind of fell flat, like durability wise, didn't have the bounce I was hoping for. Whereas the Trainer really, because of the Incrediron, really has that bounce, but it's really well balanced by the bottom layer of the Power Run. I do wish they would update that to Power Run Plus. Somebody said that on YouTube, and I can't remember who said that, and whoever said it gets credit for that. But I think that would be nice. But I think it's for me, more versatile in what I want. When I spend too much time in true super shoes, things tend to get a little bit wonky, especially my hips and ankles. That's not happening in the Trainer. And that's what I want for a shoe that can handle a majority of my mileage. So I think the Speed is the better option for people going, yeah, I want like a racing shoe that I can also train in. The Trainer is the like, hey, I want a training shoe that if I thought about it, maybe for long distance, I could race in, but it is the Trainer. And that's why I like it, just because it can do more.
Nice. All right, we're going to move on to our next one. And this is an exercise-based this or that. So you get to choose one of these. This or that, plyometrics, or heavy weightlifting.
That's a tough one. Strictly in terms of performance, longevity, we're just picking one?
Yes, just picking one. And defend it.
Just because my world is performance, I'm going to go plyometrics. Working elasticity, quick ground contact, being able to pop off of it, running economy, all of those things, I'm going to go plyometrics. Now, that's only if I'm forced to pick one. That's for the competitive group. I think if I'm looking for longevity and having a resilient body and being able to do the sport for probably a longer period of time, like you could argue both, obviously.
Yes.
But I would probably lean more strength training and having just a more capable body to just endure running. But for the people that are trying to go really fast, people that are going really fast are doing both. It's like But I'd say plyos probably. And I would even include plyos, not just in terms of the traditional, whether you're doing depth jumps or split jumps or drills, strides, like I would argue sprinting is a plyometric. Doing a hard, quick sprint, like you are loading very quickly, popping off of it, and it's for no longer than maybe 10 seconds. We're not talking like a stride, we're talking a sprint. And being able to turn over power and use your body, I think, can pay dividends when you're talking the performance realm of things. So that's my argument for plyometrics, but you could make an equally as strong argument for strength training. And I obviously, if you can tell in the tone of my voice, I like both. I don't think I'm being forced into a wall here.
Yeah, and I'll just continue with being forced into the wall. I think when I really think about this holistically, I think of a spectrum of loading and different purposes for different types of loading. I think that some exercises prepare you for other types of exercises. But I think if I had to pick between the two, which reality is we don't have to pick between the two, but if we had to, I would also pick plyometrics. I think that some of the ones that, and especially for myself, and that's for a couple reasons. One is because to get the benefit out of plyometrics, it takes a very little amount of time. You do not need a high amount of dosage of plyometrics to get the benefits that come along with them. So they're easy to access. Plus you can just do them from a couch or whatever you've got, And then I think another reason is because of the assistance with bone health. And so having plyometrics and part of that loading. And then the third one is because running is a series of, hopping on one foot over and over and over, or back and forth on your feet. The way that our tendons are loaded are through kind of elastic kind of recoil of something like the Achilles. And there's almost like an isometric contraction of our muscles, and that's not replicated in heavy lifting, but it is or can be with some of the plyometric work. So I think that there's a lot that is beneficial about plyometrics if I had to pick one, though I think, or we know that the amount of loading on your tissues, like your tendons, is very high with plyometrics. So if you don't have the resolve within those tissues to handle it, you're actually going to just potentially cause an injury. So I don't think you can only choose one. I think you need to prepare your body for these different types of things. But if I had to, I would say plyometric. Matt, what about you?
So I'm going to give an interesting take on this. I'm going to agree with you too. However, to really get the benefit out of plyometrics and power work, you have to be working pretty hard. And that takes some experience to actually know how to do those correctly. That plyometrics are not something that someone with no jump, like there's a progression that you got to work through to be able to go, hey, can I actually get to really do these well so that you're truly maxing out at the amount that you need to. Like when Nate's talking about you shouldn't be doing a ton of these. That's when you're really maxing out. To teach people how to do that takes a little bit. So for the untrained individual that's early on, I would actually suggest heavy weight training, because I think it's a little bit safer because it's a little bit slower. However, plyometrics are going to have the greatest benefit, not just from a performance perspective, but also from an age perspective. That's what my research was on. It was looking at masters runners. And here's a couple things. We lose muscle mass as we age, unless you work on it. We lose more strength than we lose muscle mass, and we lose more power than we lose strength. So power is the thing that we lose the most. It's also the greatest predictor of fall risk as you get older. Strength somewhat, but power is the greatest predictor of a lot of health factors, even more so than strength, because you need to be able to react, you need to be able to get up. So for when I'm working with a lot of older individuals and not just runners, if I can get to the jump, there's amazing benefits. There's great things that happen. You do get hypertrophy. You do get lots of nervous system stimulation. But if that person isn't safe to be doing that, I'm going to be doing weight training. But optimally, you should do both. Plyometrics have the biggest bang for your buck, but you need to be safe, but also very specific with how you do those.
I would also argue, though, heavy strength training is not necessarily safe in nature either.
True.
Where you are doing heavy strength training, right? So if you're taking someone who's a novice to this, and let's say you're not just going to toss them into a 5x5 strength set.
Yeah.
A genuine 5x5.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's a lot of load to lift
for
anyone, experienced or not. And so I would say you would want some experience for both,
That's totally fair, but would you rather have an untrained person do like a 5x5 or do 5x5 depth jumps?
Well, it doesn't have to be depth jumps.
No, I'm just saying, because
it could be like a seated position to a jump, and you catch yourself.
That's not a plyometric.
That's not a plyo. You're exploding off the ground. You're getting off the ground. How is that not a plyo?
That's a ballistic movement. A plyometric is you actually have to use the stretch shortening cycle.
All right. You have to load it though. You got to get over, generate power, and get off. That is a stretch shortening cycle.
But the stretch shortening cycle has to be enough that you elicit that reflex. Power is great. Like power exercises are awesome, and those are much safer. However, you are not going to get the same economy benefits from doing power stuff as you are doing plyometrics. That's different. If we were just going to do power versus heavy strength, I actually might have a different answer. But a true plyometric, if you're really using the stretch shortening cycle, then yes, but that's also it's high. It's a high risk.
Would you argue that that's a quality of plyometric issue?
What do you mean?
Because I would argue you're still using the stretch shortening cycle. You're not getting up, stopping, and going. You are getting forward momentum. Like your glutes are going into an eccentric moment where they have to snap and extend. Yeah. That is a stretch shortening cycle. It's not as hard on the calves as like some of the other stuff, but that is still a stretch shortening cycle. But the intensity of it is not as large as it would be with other movements.
Yeah, so you can have like a power movement where you don't move as fast, but actually to get the real stretch shortening reflex, which I can't believe that I'm forgetting the name of that instant. What's that called?
Like the muscle spindle? What are you going for?
It's evoked by that. Because
it's shortening reflex,
yeah, there's a name for this. The what's that phase called?
The amortization phase.
Yeah, so the amortization phase, for it to be a true plyometric, has to be very short. Like if you're doing plyometrics, if you jump and land and stop, that's not a plyometric anymore. It's got to be on and quickly off to actually be able to utilize that, or it's just a power exercise.
I hear the argument.
Right?
Yeah, so I gotcha.
I hear you, and doing that stuff like a chair, being able to jump off that is really important, and that's where you need to start. And I think a lot of people might be where they max out, because to do a true plyo can be really difficult, and there's a very high risk to that. There's a high risk reward, but it's a very high risk. My
favorite initial plyometric is to hook. Oh, my super bands are too far away. But hooking super bands up high and then holding them and doing jumping from the ground with those. And
that's great.
I think that's a really nice way, because it can offload a ton of your body weight to get used to that idea of what's it look like to rebound off the ground quickly. It's a good one.
Yep.
I think what I'm hearing in this conversation,
right? Yeah.
What I'm hearing though, I think this would be. I mean,
you have to pogo in order for it to be a plyo. I'm just kidding. I'm joking.
I think
like
we should
a pogo,
have a longer,
like a bounce, like a quick. A lot of people call those pogos.
Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but that was my understanding of like the difference between a power, like plyometrics are a form of power exercise, but they're a unique subset because of that characterization. But
sounds like a great full podcast episode. Topic. I think different types of specific.
No, I hear you. If that truly is the nuance, you're right.
It'd be fun. All right, we've got one more for the night. It's another shoe question. We've just been able to start testing some shoes from Diadora. They reached out to us and asked if we wanted to take some time to test out their models. So they started sending us some stuff. So we've been able to do that. So we are comparing one of their models, the Cellula, to the Nimbus 27. So this or that, Cellula or Nimbus 27?
Cellula.
Nimbus. David, you first.
You dig into why?
Yeah. I actually really like the Cellula. It was a pleasant surprise for me. Now, this is meant to be like, they didn't give a formal stack height on their website. They said 40 plus millimeter. So it's a high cushion shoe. Now, this is kind of Hoka-esque in that, like, it's kind of like that structured EVA feel. It's nothing like super bouncy, but it has a lot of foam. There's plenty of cushioning. Like, it's not like there isn't cushioning. It's just a little bit firmer. And I like the way they constructed the sidewalls here. You have a really stable rear foot, but it's not super built out like the Bondi we were talking about earlier. But I do think there's some resemblance to that. And it plays off of its geometry. It is kind of a stiffer rockered shoe. But again, as you can kind of see, that forefoot isn't super dramatic. And neither is the heel. It's rounded, but it's not. It's a nice balanced rocker profile, and it's pretty stiff. I mean, like there's a little bit of flexibility when you load it, but it's a pretty stiff shoe. Another one where we were talking about volume, it started off pretty snug, but it broke in pretty well, and I was very thankful it did because I wasn't 100% sure if it was going to work for me. But outside of fixing a couple things on the upper, there, I have really enjoyed the ride of this shoe, and it's very rhythmic. It works for my mechanics. And again, it's nothing like super responsive per se, but it's a nice daily shoe to just beat up miles in. Nice. So I've really enjoyed my time with the Cellula. It's kind of like that slightly structured, neutral shoe, like that mild stability type shoe.
Cool. Matt, why the Nimbus for you?
Yeah,
Nimbus 27, right?
27.
The Nimbus 27.
Yeah. I think David did a great job in his Cellula review. I haven't fortunately got enough miles to be able to contribute to that, but I think you hit that on the head where I was like, wow, this is really pleasant. I haven't tried a Diadora shoe. That's really the first couple that I tried. And I actually felt like initially it was a teeny bit firm, and then the cushioning was like very well balanced. Like it broke in very nicely. And yeah, I want to echo that those uppers on Diadora like feel so low volume and snug. And it's like an Italian leather shoe that I've actually never worn a shoe that is Italian leather. So I just am making this reference with no background, just suppose that this is a thing. But yeah, it broke in. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of nice, like form fitting. I totally get you. I just like the Nimbus because it really did a 360, a 180. So I can't do English. I can't do English, but I know my plyometrics, so hopefully that helps. A 180. Oh gosh, total loss of everything. Total 180, and that I felt like 25, 26 was really soft, and then 27 was like more resilient. Like it felt more firm, but really cushioned. It rolled really nicely. It was kind of what I wanted the Cumulus to be, but the Cumulus doesn't fit me very well. And that forefoot rocker, the toe spring is so rough that I just couldn't run it that much. But it really is balanced very nicely. I would say similar to Cellula. It's not full stable neutral, but it's getting there where it's enough. And it rode better for me. And nice. I appreciate the Cellula. I think just the upper took long enough that I was like, sorry, Nimbus is going to win this.
Yeah. And I think my opinion on the Nimbus is 25 was wicked soft. 26, they did change the foam and it got slightly firmer.
Yep.
And now they are moving that direction. Great. Well, thank you all for joining us you have something to say?
One more.
Do you want to do that one?
Yeah, because I want to be able to. I want to hear David's full thoughts on this too.
All right, so one last one. Then I was going to wrap us up, but we got one more.
I was ready for night.
Yeah, we were going to go to bed. Jeez, but
we've already been here, a half hour later because of Nate.
It was my fault.
I know.
Yeah. All right, so here it is.
For the listeners too, I do that to Nate all the time. It's a joke.
Yes.
I intentionally, jokingly get after him for small things like that. Yeah.
Whenever David says something nice to me, I'm like, what's behind this? There must be a joke that I'm not getting because he doesn't actually say nice things to me, but in a loving way. Like we know this. Okay. But here it is. Our final one from Saucony, Endorphin Elite 1 or Endorphin Elite 2. Take it away, David.
Of course. It's a hard one, man. I went back and forth on this.
You raced marathons in the Elite One,
yeah, my PR's in the Elite One.
Yeah.
It's a very, very hard answer, but I think I'm gonna go Endorphin Elite 2.
Wow.
But it took some convincing. It wasn't, when I first put it on, I wasn't entirely sure about it. that Incrediron foam is really soft. It's really soft, very compliant, but it's really bouncy. You know, it does give you responsiveness when you load it. And I think where I started really noticing a difference in the shoes. So it's ironic because what I loved about Endorphin Elite 1 was that HG foam was a little bit firmer, but it was still really bouncy. And it was nice and responsive, and it did well with the geometry. Where things differ here on Endorphin Elite 2, I do wish the forefoot, actually, we're talking about width, I wish that was a little bit wider in the Elite 2. I do feel it on the edges, but it's not enough for me to be like, I can't run in it. The traction's better on Elite 2. Traction on Elite 1, I did start to get a little bit of slipping. I didn't initially, but then once it started like breaking in a little bit more, like that rubber started to slide a little bit. So I think it grips a little bit better on Endorphin Elite 2. For how soft that shoe is where I land, I don't feel like it was wildly unstable. Was it more unstable than Elite 1? Yes, but I feel like the upper locked down well. It really got you onto that platform. Traction was a little bit better. Now, where I land, I don't land quite as hard on that heel like Klein does. And we had very different experiences on that initial contact and landing through that region. I think if I did land harder there, my answer might be different. But I think my mechanics still respond to the geometry of Endorphin Elite 2 similar enough to 1 to where I can look past some of that softness for some of that increased bounce, because I do think some of that responsiveness is higher in the Endorphin Elite 2. Yeah. And with the workouts I did, when I settled into like a float or when I kind of was in more in that marathon type pacing, that shoe felt really rhythmic and really smooth. So I haven't raced in it yet. You know, I just haven't done a lot of racing lately, and the shoe was a recent acquisition. But looking at a half in the future, I was eyeing it as maybe running in the Elite 2 over the edge Paris. I'm on the fence. I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah.
But as much as I love the Elite 1, I do think I'm going to go Elite 2. I think it's just enough of positive impacts for me to just give it that nod.
Nice. And you said it was less stable, but I think, Matt, in yours, that was one of your most stable. The Elite 1 was one of the most stable racing shoes in your opinion.
And this certainly is not anymore.
Right. So, but it didn't go from an unstable racing shoe to a more unstable racing shoe. It went from
stable
on the
to
spectrum.
Less stable.
Yes. Yeah. Matt, do you have anything to add?
I think David touched on a lot. There's a lot of great improvements. This is my left shoe. I've got almost 40 miles on that. Whereas the Elite 1 couldn't handle that. The traction, as David mentioned.
Especially for how soft that shoe is. You really are going to be like grinding that thing. Yep, Sorry, that's not me knocking his mechanics. No. It's just the way he lands.
Yep.
Like, yeah, I would think you would tear that outsole.
Poor David's gotten enough shoes from me. He's like, what the heck happened to this shoe? So
on one of the shoes he sent me, he literally like shoe gooed the outsole back on. And it was like the super thin, like liquid rubber kind of thing. And he just like, you could just tell like how hard he tried to just like
put
really
a little
strip back on there.
I was like trying to give this an accurate representation to poor David. There's a lot of things that are the outsole stuff is better. The traction is better. I think a lot of people are actually going to like the Elite 2 more because it is softer. It is, in my opinion, like the bounciest shoe on the market. It's crazy bouncy. The problem is the narrower platform. It's just not stable enough for me to take super long. I'm still going to try to get as many miles on it, but like that rear foot is unstable enough that like I get a little bit of like calcaneal Achilles irritation from excessive motion. So I have to be a little bit cautious. But Elite 1 is going to be, because that was like one of the great, stable neutral shoes that worked for a lot of people. I know we're a little niche in those looking for a super shoe that's more stable, but because of that, yes. But I still think version 2 is great. I'm just going to pick version 1.
Perfect. Matt, do I have your permission to end the episode?
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, great.
You don't want to ask if each shoe is a pizza, what we're going to do?
No. Thank you all again for joining us. Again, if you are new to the podcast listening, thanks for checking us out. And we always love to hear people's perspectives of what they want to have heard on the podcast. So you can email email us at doctorsofrunning@gmail.com, or you can comment below if you're watching on YouTube. And we'll look forward to hearing what y'all have to say, and look forward to talking to you next time.